or you had talked about, I guess, is the concept of sharing opinions, especially when you might be ostracized or kind of taken aback from different groups. People might see you different because of sharing an opinion on something, right or wrong, right? And
Mhm.
also on the form of a platform like your social media or YouTube or anything else. So I guess kind of talk about that a little bit. How's that been for you, and when you kind of made that decision?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things I'm gonna say the milestones in my life was just me coming out as a conservative back in 2020. And uh, I for a long time, being in my community, I just, I was a Democrat, and I just thought I didn't even know what that really meant. I just knew that I'm not supposed to be a conservative Republican because that's for the rich white people. That's
Yeah.
what I was told. No one explained to me what their policies or their ideologies were. I just knew that I wasn't supposed to be a part of that because I'm black, or the black and brown community. We just were supposed to be Democrats, like, automatically, and so I just blindly agreed with that, and um, I didn't really bother to do any research in regards to foreign policies and just policies in general with certain candidates. What did they actually believe in, specifically about abortion and all this stuff? And I think a lot of it actually started with Donald Trump, to be honest with you. When he showed up back in like 2016, and he was running for president, I thought, oh, this is kind of funny,
He
Donald Trump,
appeared
like
out
he
of
was
the
going to be.
void on a presidential run
Yeah,
from hell. Like he just
yeah,
went
I
for
just thought it
it.
was so, but I thought it was so silly. Like, oh, Donald Trump, right? He's going to be president, and I
Yeah.
didn't think he was going to be president. I thought it was a joke. But I was like, man, I normally don't watch the presidential debates because they're boring and they're talking about things I don't really care for. But I was like, but I will watch for him because I know he's going to be funny. Like he's the
Yeah.
apprentice guy. Like, so yeah, you're fired. So yeah, yeah. So didn't know too much about him. I just knew he was in a lot of rap songs, and a lot of black artists and a lot of people just in general for years. Always loved being around him. He was always, they were at his parties, and WrestleMania, like you name it, he was everywhere.
That's
Everyone loved Donald Trump. So I'm just
yeah.
like, this guy's like, he's he was just very entertaining. You always thought, but but yeah, when he ran for president and actually won, um, I don't know, for the first time I was watching a lot of the things that he was saying and doing, and I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting. Like, he's actually behaving like somebody who actually values the United States. He actually values what it is that we actually represent. And for me, it never occurred to me to actually be happy that I'm an American. I always thought, well, I could have been anywhere in the world, and it's just, I don't know, you just live your life, and but he was one of the sources that really reminded me and a lot of other people that it's a privilege to be born in the United States. It's a privilege to be here and to be protected by the United States Constitution, to have these inalienable rights that can be taken away because we're God's children, and all these different things. And I just watched him over the years, and I just thought, wow. At one point, I just said, I think when um, the virus hit everything, and I seen the division between different communities, and sometimes people of their own household, how they conducted themselves. I almost felt like it was almost a blessing in disguise because it really showed where everyone's mindsets actually were. You had a lot of people that blindly agreed with the government, as we were saying, and they actually seemed to almost treat the government like God. Like if the government said something, they just blindly agreed, and they didn't
Yeah.
need to know any data behind it. They just agreed. And if the government decided to change something, they just agreed with that, and there was no, And then I noticed that there was a lot of these other people that seemed to be a little bit more skeptical, but were interested in finding out their own information. I noticed many of them, not all, were more on the conservative Republican side, and that's what kind of moved me to kind of openly say, wait a minute, okay, I actually support what this guy is saying. He's actually really pushing even Black America to like it's time to like start voting differently. Stop doing the same thing that hasn't worked for your community all this time, and voting for people that every 4 years they're like, I don't know, trying to rile you up about police brutality and all this stuff, and they don't really instill the policies and the changes that will affect your community. Like, it's time for you to do something different. And so, yeah, back in 2020, I'm listening to there's the George Floyd situation and Candace Owens and all these different communities, arguments and debates and Donald Trump. And yeah, I realized like I'm a conservative. And so I started expressing that openly. And prior to that, I didn't care to even get into politics. I thought it was always like too complex for me to get into. I didn't think I was smart enough to really get into that at the time.
Yeah.
I just thought, oh, that's for the intellectuals to know that stuff. But I realized that as an American, and more specifically, and more importantly, as a Christian, I do have the responsibility to engage the political discussions about abortion, about immigration, about foreign policies, all these things. Like I have a role in that. I'm not supposed to sit down on the couch and say, okay, let me just look into the sky
Yeah.
and hopefully God will just fix everything, but to be a part of those discussions and to change people's minds. And, and I remember one of the first times with God's help, of course, I was talking to a guy who was visiting our country, a German guy. And, I was talking to him about abortion. And he said, well, he's a Christian as well, but he believes that it's important to have those, to have abortion available. And he believed in it, he supported it. And at the time, like I realized that I had read this really well thought out book of The Case for Life by Scott Klusendorf.
Yeah.
And he really gave a really legitimate argument to argue the value of human life from a scientific standpoint. He's a Christian, but he argued that there's a way to defend human life just from a scientific perspective, and that was something that he really encouraged Christians to do. It's like, yes, we know God doesn't want us to kill human beings. That's in the commandments, the eighth commandment, thou shalt not kill or murder.
Yeah.
But he argued to know how to argue properly, and just systematically have like an argument, from a scientific standpoint. And I remember walking through these steps with this guy, and this guy's intelligent. He's visiting our country. He's in the process of building a company, and all this stuff. So very well versed in politics. His father's a politician. But I talked him out of like abortion.
Oh, really?
And
yeah, you talked about that in your videos you posted this past weekend, or this past week, right?
I
did,
we'll
link those right there or something.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I just thought, wow, it's very powerful to be able to actually have a legitimate argument and share it with somebody and be able to explain it clearly, and But I started noticing that I could do that with other things as well.
Yeah.
But just in a general sense, I came out as conservative, and already like a lot of my stuff was controversial to some extent because I was just talking about God. And as a Christian, like already that's antithetical to what.
Hey, whoa. Cody, relax. He's a crackhead, man. He just out of nowhere.
Did somebody pass by or something?
Yeah, he was like looking out the window, but yeah, something happened. Anyway, that's interesting. It's definitely something I've kind of realized more recently this past year. I'm trying to share more thoughts on Twitter and different aspects and through videos and stuff.
You're doing a good job, by the way. You're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Love your thoughts, man.
But just creating something and writing more and expressing those thoughts, like forming them out completely instead of just a passing glance, a passing thought, and forgetting about it, right? And actually having to present it, but being willing to defend it too, right? Especially something controversial topic like this, and we had countless discussions before we actually came to decide to do this. We were both very skeptical. Like we both wanted to do it because we love talking to each other about it, and but you've always been way more confident with the way you talk about these sensitive subjects, and I've always been reserved. I'm like, I don't know. Because I feel some things, but I'm very empathetic to the other side a lot of times. And what's interesting, you bring up 2020 when all that stuff happened, because I think I was talking to you about maybe some of the inverse and how, I saw myself, I guess, mainly as conservative, but like a more like middle right conservative, and then all this stuff happened in 2020 in the summer, and we both kind of talked about how we were just kind of going through different resources and looking at different things, and I think it was just like a hard day for everybody, I think, on social media that couple days. Like it was just tough to see all the stuff you would see on your phone. But as far as like sharing ideas and discerning what to talk about, right? There's like the entertainment part, there's like entertainment, philosophy, and religion, right? It's all because everyone likes the entertainment part, but there's real problems and things that happen in society, and there's interesting discussions. Like I thought the AI thing was great, right? Um, so it's important to share these things, and what really helps me is like seeing some of my friends, people that I went to school with, people that I've had great conversations with, or just that I have meaningful friendships with. They've reached out, afterwards, being like, "Oh, that's the message I needed to hear today, man. Thank you," or "Keep up the good
Nice,
work,"
man.
and different things like that. And it's really humbling and it's really great to hear, and I'm very thankful for that. That's kind of my whole goal, is to share these ideas, and if
Mhm.
someone has been there before, if I've been there before, and I can share what I've learned from that experience, by all means I want to share it. I want to help you through that time. For instance, I have one of my really close buddies. He's going through a breakup right now, and it's pretty tough on him. And I don't have all the experience in the world with that. Me and my wife were really strong for like 8 years. We did have some troubles before we actually
Of course.
tied the
Mhm.
knot, but
Yeah, yeah.
like we got through them and stuff. So but what I can share from my perspective is, different things we've been through. And so just trying to help people out, and him specifically through that, has been interesting and a challenge, and sharing a message of self-respect and self-love, and acknowledging
Interesting.
who you're spending your time with and who is deserving of your time, you know
I like that. I like that.
so yeah, there's plenty of things to get into, and that's why I think it's good to just be brave about it. And if you have something to say, if you have something important to share, if it can help even one person you can think of, post it, share it, let people know. You'd be surprised the kind of reach back you get. You know?
That's interesting you bring that up because, one of the reasons why, it's funny because at first I thought to myself, well, when the beginning of this year, when I transitioned into finally doing the YouTube thing, I thought to myself, okay, should I still do videos on Instagram and Facebook, and how would that look? Like, what if I'm just talking about the same things? But it seems like you said, there's always things to talk about. And one of the things I love doing is making reference to actual experiences that I've had. And it seems
Yeah.
like those are just endless and they're always happening. Like I've had experience just the last 7 days. It's fascinating how there's so much more material um, to share as you just keep going. I think the only real challenge is it's one thing when you're saying these nice messages that are encouraging to people, but when you say something that is um, that's honest and truthful, that almost aligns with the reality that of course God has established in His Word, that's when there can be a bit of a challenge. Is when you stand for something that aligns more so with God. So people will applaud you if you say you're a Christian, if you love Jesus, because there's plenty of people that'll say they love Jesus also. The Mormon loves Jesus. Those in Islam love Jesus. Jehovah Witness, Roman Catholics, everyone loves Jesus. Okay, even atheists say, "Oh yeah, Jesus is cool, good teacher." So no one has an issue with that. But if you say something in the nature of, well, the only way that you're going to get to heaven is through Jesus Christ, who has revealed Himself in Scripture, the biblical Jesus, that's going to be an issue. That'll be an issue. And that's what's really going to test what type of person you really are. Because it's one thing for people to applaud you when you're saying a nice message that's universal and it's kind of safe.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to say, "Okay, we love Jesus too," or, "Oh yeah, that's good. If you want to do that, that's cool, and I'm going to do my thing, but I don't support that, but I'm supporting you." So that's one thing. Um, but yeah, to tell somebody, hey, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I had an encounter with a gentleman that, every time I was visiting him and his girlfriend, he would try to lecture me about the Bible. About
Yeah.
a little over 2 years ago, he decided that he wanted to adopt religion, and I thought, oh man, it's cool that he's a Christian finally. And then I started listening to him and found out he was not a Christian, but he had more of a different perspective. And I think Hebrew
Black
Israelites.
Hebrew Israelite, right? That you talked about.
Yeah, correct,
Yeah, we
correct.
talked about
Yeah,
that a little bit.
absolutely. And so I was already familiar with some of those practices. But yeah, he decided that he wanted to really push all these different ideas, and I eventually had to kind of let him know, like after a series of discussions on the phone, and even just there are times in person I have to let him know that. Um, I can't take what you're saying seriously. There's not any credibility behind what you're doing when you're living in sin the way that you are, and you're actually living with your girlfriend and you're trying to talk to me about God's morality and justice and his ethics, and that's actually like hypocritical, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, yeah, and I would, and when you stand and draw that line in the sand, uh, that is a different test right there. That's when it's like, okay, this is not like kindergarten. This is like you're transitioning into something serious, So I think
Do we
it's
do we need to be perfect to teach a message?
I'll put it this way. It's one thing if you're using yourself as the standard, but it's something else when you say, well, God said that, not me.
Yeah.
God said it. Yeah. And so that's sort of the issue. And that's always been the issue when it came to like the true church is they didn't say, well, I said it. They always said, well, God said that. And I didn't say that. And that's what, got a lot of people killed. And even over the centuries after, the people, the New Testament writers and the apostles passed away, even the early church fathers and people condemned by, even the Roman Catholic faith. It's like, hey, we have this established, hierarchy, and we are going to pray this way. We're going to do things this way, and this is how we're going to interpret the Bible. And some people stepped up and said, well, no, that's not what the Bible teaches. And so, you would have some groups that say, okay, well then, you realize that you're going to be sentenced to death because you're going against what we teach. And these people said, well, I don't care. This is what the Bible teaches. I'm not going to give up what God says just to appease you. You're a human
Yeah.
being. You're going to answer to him too. And it's very interesting because when you read books like the Fox Book of Martyrs, when you find out all these different people that died over the years for their faith, you realize that there was something in them that they lost the interest. They lost that fear of dying, either prior to that moment or during that moment. They were not afraid to be set on fire. They were not afraid to be hung. They were not afraid to be drowned. There was something God did to them that I don't know. He was very faithful, and he demonstrated his love towards them, even towards the end. But I'm using an extreme case, but yeah, I mean, just like somebody like I don't know, President Trump or whoever else. It's like if you say too many things that you're declaring God's truth, you will be blocked on
Yeah.
YouTube and you will be blocked on Twitter, and you will be blocked. There's certain things that are just not allowed, and so some people will say, okay, let me just play it safe and let me just dilute my message. And other people say, well, I don't really care about that because we're all going to answer him one day, So,
That's
um,
super
yeah,
interesting that you bring up the martyrs because that's actually one of the like biggest reasons why I like believe in this in Christianity so much is because there are these people all throughout history that have died for this cause, for Jesus Christ's name. And you hear all the stories about how effective torture is and Spanish Inquisition and all that and getting people to tell you what you want to hear regardless of its truth. And these people went through, barbaric tortures, and all of them, died and would rather die than even give
yeah,
up his name, And that's going from the apostles who, had rejected Jesus 3 times, and different things like that. And
yeah,
they had
yeah,
already set precedents of like in situations they're not gonna stand by him, but after the resurrection and him going to see these people, it's there's no more question, that whatever
correct,
they have seen, whatever experience they had, led them to
correct.
be so forthright in their faith in Jesus Christ that they were willing to die and face any consequence to ensure their place, right? That they're doing the right thing. They
Yeah,
don't care for
yeah.
this worldly interaction.
Hmm.
So I can't justify in my head, I can't find a good reason why someone would go through all that and die for that principle unless they believed with every fiber of their being that it was true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point, Tim. It's one thing to everything is hypothetical or things are being, spoken about in regards to heaven and the new body and the new earth. But yeah, but for a group of people to see this man die, and then 3 days later he's walking around and he even shows the marks. That's how you know. Oh, this is actually legit.
Yeah.
This is real. This is actually so we don't actually have to fear. And history tells us that maybe you probably know this or maybe you don't, but even when it was time for Peter to die in the first century, his only concern was he didn't want to die the same way as Jesus. So when he was being crucified, he insisted and requested to be turned upside down so he can die a different way. He didn't want to die the same way as Jesus. He didn't feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, and yeah, and just to think about that, like his concern is this: he didn't want to model the death of Jesus because he didn't think he was worthy of that. That
Uh-huh.
was his only concern, not of dying, you know, not of dying. It's like he already knew that was coming. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And yeah, it really demonstrates that there has to be something behind this. If Christianity is that only faith that when it comes to uh, other world religions and other communities and other countries, the Bible is being, withheld, from being used in public settings, and you're not allowed to say Jesus' name in certain prayers in certain organizations and groups and stuff like that. In certain parts of the world, if you say that you're any other faith, they're okay with that. But if you're a Christian, that's a death sentence, unless you recant that you are a Christian and things like that, which any devout Christian knows that that's not an option. It's
Yeah.
not an option, not at all. So yeah, it really shows that there's something behind this. And there's this saying that there's a concern that because we're here in the West and things are a little bit more safer, that a lot of us are not. We're not really as invested, and there's not as many believers and solid believers because we don't know what real conflict is. We don't know how it is to be in China and hide our Bibles and pages. And some people are memorizing books in the Bible because they can't have any documents of the Bible on them, or they'll be killed. So they will memorize entire books, and so it's a completely different thing in different parts of the world. But yeah, yeah. But you bring up a good point. This is something behind biblical Christianity.
That's a fair assessment as far as the kind of coddled, I'll say, lives we kind of live nowadays, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
it's like your
I like the
ancestors had to
word.
like fight and like to survive, right? And we're over here like leisurely talking about like movies and stuff, right? So it's just very different lifestyles, but you find that a lot of the same core values are still like relevant today, right? With people interaction and the way to live your life and these guidelines. And I'm going through, Bible cover to cover, and you recommended, as long as a new Christian, you should go to the New Testament. There's certain things in there that are more relevant that'll help you as new Christians, right? But I'm stubborn. I'm like, no, I want to cover to cover. I want to go from the old stuff to the new stuff. To my own detriment in some cases with the more monotonous readings, but even in
Mhm.
there, it's these building blocks of life and like models of how you should live your life, and not everything's relevant today, but there's stuff
Mhm.
there that's still that you can take, and there's little messages and nuggets of knowledge and wisdom that you can pull out and implement in today's world. Not just the Ten Commandments, but
Yeah,
other things as
yeah,
well. It's talking about respecting your spouse and everything, and how to treat and how to deal with like rebellious youth and stuff, and all the
I was just thinking about that. Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah. There's some definitely
some
some
rough stuff.
yeah,
Some rough
yeah,
stuff.
some rough punishments. But what it was saying was that like there's these presented these extreme punishments as deterrents, right? Deterrents. And never in scripture was there any example of them actually going through with a lot of these laws
Correct.
because they didn't happen, right?
Correct. Correct.
So yeah, there's a lot to pull from there, and just to kind of meditate about where we came from as a species and how we all the stuff we've been through, and you got to kind of not just be blindsided by like what's in front of you, tunnel vision of like your time and everything's relevant now, but see how it connects to history and see how it connects to things we've been through in the past, and because history repeats itself, you see this all the time,
Yeah, in
and
many ways, absolutely.
again, getting pessimistic with how the government's going and other stuff, and like if America's been around a while, and all these other, really good societies kind of started to deteriorate a little bit. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, yeah.
it's not really the point of this podcast. Doom saying. There's always, I think, there's as long as there's strong leaders and strong men and people that can have some faith, not just in God, but in uh, the sense of like being a leader for a community. I think we'll everything will be okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the emphasis we have in the, I'm going to say more so in the Reformed community, is that because we understand the Bible teaching that God is the one that raises up leaders, He's the one that raises up Christians. Anything that He needs for people to be, He will do that. He will do that. Like even if He, I'll use myself as an example. Maybe that'll help. But I mean, 20 years ago, it's like I just wanted to play my video games and be left alone. And I didn't care about voicing my thoughts about things publicly and stuff like that. It wasn't until later on with MySpace and I transitioned to Facebook and I started becoming a little bit more open about that. And then, but even then I was not okay with talking to people who were atheists or because I kept thinking, man, they're going to hit me with science and they're going to hit me with philosophy and that's going to be intimidating. But I feel like over time, it was fascinating, but it was like God taking the time at my own pace to instill these things uh, piece by piece and reinforcing these things that I started to learn over time. And I realized, like, wow, God is so faithful. Like, if He wants you to do something, He's going to give you the tools
Yeah.
over time to give you what you need. He's going to give them to you. And, one of my female friends, I was chatting with her, I think sometime last year, and she's somebody that also identifies as a Christian, but she really emphasizes the uh, just education and things like that. I think she's aiming for her master's right now, and I think she possibly wants to explore some other things. And I can tell that with people like her, and I'll say like people like you, she has a different perspective than someone like you. Like you understand the significance of education, but you don't equate education as God.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You don't think, okay, now that you have this education, now life can be perfect. Now that you have this document, and for her, I can tell by the way she expresses herself, she actually believes that. She believes that the that some type of schooling and getting that certificate, getting that degree, getting that that established is somehow equated to the promised land. Like everything's just going to be fine, but you have to get this degree or you have to go to schools for a certain so you can obtain whatever it is that she feels success is or whatever.
Well,
Um,
I mean, not to cut you off, but like that's kind of a product of generationally what we've been taught.
I
Uh,
would agree. Would agree with you.
yeah, it's
I would
kind of
agree.
like the parents and like for a long time, I'd say more so maybe your generation than mine. Mine is kind of teeter, and even the future ones are learning more and more
Yeah.
that maybe it's not the best thing to always
Oh yeah.
go college route. But for decades, it was like to be successful at all,
Yeah. Yeah.
get
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
degree,
Yeah.
right? No
Yeah.
question.
I have aunts that are still reciting that, and they're like 80 years old, and they still think that's the promised land.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of the things I was bringing up to my female friend about this because I didn't want to discredit like education and things like that. I think it has its use. I think that there are some people it works out for very well. It opens up doors that a person wants to pass that a person wants to venture into. So yeah, I'm all for it. Um, but one of the things I was trying to help her understand, and this brings us to the book of Acts, chapter 4, I believe it's verse 13.
Oh, it's like a
Um,
superpower. Impressive.
yeah, believe me, it takes a lot of. Well, honestly, there are certain things that stands out to me that I know I'm going to need.
Yeah.
So I almost force myself to memorize this stuff.
Yeah.
Like for example, I know for example how important education is to some people. Like some people believe education equates to the promised land. So I committed to this verse because I thought it was very significant. And the idea behind this verse is that the Pharisees were challenged by they were confronting Peter and John, in the book of Acts. So this is the early stages of the church, the first century church. Jesus is already gone. He's already ascended back into heaven. He's gone. He's brought the Holy Spirit. So now everyone, all believers are now instilled with the Holy Spirit. So they have a boldness. They're strong. They're confident, and they're not afraid of death or anything like that. And so uh, in the Bible verse, it says that the Pharisees took notice that although Peter and John were not learned men, okay, so that was showing like, hey, they didn't go to school, they're regular guys, regular folk, you
Fisherman.
know. Yeah, yeah, there you go, yeah. Um, but they took notice, the Bible says, that they had been spending time with Jesus. It was the way that they carried themselves. He could tell that they whatever he had, they have it too. They have it too. And I was helping my friend understand that, it's one thing to have education and trying to succeed in the things of this world. If you have good intentions, hey, more power to you. But that doesn't necessarily equate to one's spiritual life. That's something that God instills in a person. And I was just reminding her that even the Pharisees who had this prestigious schooling and this background and this education, and everyone, every time they're roaming around, people are kissing their hand, and every time they speak, everyone wants to hear what they have to say because they feel like these people are that middleman between God and themselves. But even the Pharisees knew, even after Jesus died and he's been killed, but they took notice that these men were different. That even though they didn't have that same education as themselves, that these men spoke boldly that they were actually they demonstrated that they were walking with Christ.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think it's important to make that distinction, and both can be important. But yeah, our spiritual lives is not based on a document, or it's not based on experiences as well. There's some people who have tried to lecture me and say, well, hey, James, I've been in 10 relationships and you haven't been in barely, one or two. Like my thoughts are more credible than you. And to me, I have to politely share them. Well, doesn't that show evidence that you didn't actually know what you were doing? Right? I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't, I don't know. It's like 10 times or whatever, it's like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's up for debate, but yeah, that's, I don't know. But yeah, it's very fascinating, but I have learned that over time, I was not very open to having these discussions with anybody because I thought it was very uncomfortable. I don't want to say these things that can be offensive to a person, but I started realizing that when you truly, genuinely love people, you do tell them and you do warn them and you do let them know that, hey, I know that you have this lifestyle or whatever, but this is antithetical to what the Bible teaches, and you're going to give an account to God on the day of judgment if you continue this path. You have to come to Christ. You have to come to Christ.
Yeah.
There is no other option. You don't have any other option. It's time to bow the knee and come to Christ. Because he doesn't invite you like the modern church says. He commands you.
Yeah.
He commands.
Yeah. With the, Bible, evidence study Bible you gave me, I'm reading all this Ray Comfort's notes and everything, and different people he references, talking about how there's a lot of, Jesus loves you type of evangelism, right? And it's, it's true, but it's also like you could be lulling people into a false sense of security if you don't start with the law and, the 10 Commandments, what's just, and proving to people like nobody's perfect, right? We're all sinners and we all need to, recognize that. And that's the first step.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's so true. I love that you know that, man. That's awesome.
I'm learning stuff, man.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's awesome. It's interesting because I would love to be present for you to, I don't know, for someone to share something that's the opposite of that, and I wonder like how you would respond. And,
well, okay, so yeah, and I've thought too. I want to start evangelizing more, just being able to defend my thoughts. And I've talked to you about this. Like, there's certain things I'm all in on, and certain things I'm still trying to wrestle with, right? And I know,
Sure.
I do believe like the Bible is true and everything, but that comes with like, the whole, everything I've learned in the past 20 something years about the theory of evolution and everything, and Genesis. And I've talked to you how I'm still going through that and trying to look for all sorts of resources on that. And I'll look at like, talks between an atheist and then a Christian or any types of people, right? So just trying, a bunch of food for thought as far as all those topics, but I was actually, with my grandpa Lolo, we were having a discussion before we came back to Illinois after Christmas, and I was talking to him about, he said he was religious, but he's struggling in his head. So he's fine, and he thinks God is there, but he just at times will think like, why, if he is there, why is there all this suffering and stuff, right? And so I was thinking like, oh, I know that's a question in the Bible that I can look up right now. And I did, and so that was kind of, I feel like my first real attempt to kind of express my faith and like the way I see things, and it was kind of met with certain things, like, history is told by the victor, and how can you know that it's not just a bunch of stories that were kind of like told from not the true perspective? It might be mostly truth, but some of it right, false. Brought up like the Dead Sea Scrolls and how that comparison kind of shows us a lot of the Bible translations were largely accurate except for just vernacular, how to say it, right? largely accurate to the main story at least, right? And then basically the whole concept of suffering and everything is our original sin, right? He created everything perfect, and our original sin created like the butterfly effect, huge
Okay.
overlapping
Yeah,
effect of
yeah,
like
yeah. That's a nice
why,
way to say it. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
why there's
Yeah.
evil in the world. And people that are like, oh, well, why doesn't God stop it? Why does He allow that? And it brought up the question of like, should God, like, in a society, do we stop people before they commit crimes, or do we punish people afterwards? You know, and is it just to, if you know someone is going to commit a crime, is it just to stop them by any means necessary before that
Yeah. Yeah.
happens? You know, and vastly majority, I think most people would say no, it's not okay. You know, people have to pay for what they've done, not for what they're going to do, because you don't know. Um,
That's so fascinating, Tim. There's a movie concept with
the
Tom
Minority
Cruise about that.
Report, right?
Report. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. That's
I
very fascinating.
I haven't seen it, and then I know it's also referenced in Winter Soldier, how Hydra's like taking over.
Yeah, yeah.
They're trying to take out all their enemies before they're even enemies.
Mm.
So yeah, that concept's kind of it comes up a couple times, and I think majority of the time that's the wrong answer, right?
Correct. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um,
That's, that's so fascinating. Yeah, I was gonna just say that and I don't know if it was just the natural way that I've operated, or I don't know if it was just over time. God really instilled this in me, but I became very hungry to learn how to defend the Bible. It
yeah,
was just something that was cultivated in me, and so I found myself not only early in my walk with the Lord, watching constant YouTube videos of men and women of the faith, evangelizing, and I've showed you and your family a few Ray Comfort videos, and I really recommend to go over some of those. And a lot of times, I think he knows our attention spans are not the best. So his stuff is always under an hour. Some are like
yeah,
under 40 minutes, and they're very, very well done. But he always communicates with people from the natural realm, like he always says, and then switch over to, spiritual things and things like that. But I noticed that confidence of speaking on things uh, really makes a difference when you familiarize yourself with enough information on how to, and then one of the things that Ray always brings up is most people operate the exact same way. They're going to say the same stuff. So once you familiarize yourself with that kind of stuff, like it's almost like it's very easy. Like I know if you and I are talking to somebody who's rejecting God, first thing they're going to say is, "Oh, okay, well, where are the dinosaurs then, huh? Or how do we get the Bible? Or where's Noah's Ark?" Like, so eventually you can actually find out how to answer those things.
yeah,
You can learn how to answer, and my recommendation is not to dwell on them too long, because what happens is, you get sidetracked and they want to get away from the real thing, which is they don't like God because they like their adultery or their fornication or their lying or stealing or cheating. They like that. So they don't want to talk about who God is. Because they already know there's a God. That's Romans 1:20. Everyone knows there's a God. There's
yeah.
no atheist.
The the
Yeah.
the problem is a lot of people don't can take the Bible as the fact and everything that we as Christians take it as, or at least most people as Christians should take it as. We
Agreed.
see it as a
Agreed.
primary source versus like other people might not see it as credible at all, right?
Yeah.
A work
Yeah.
of a work of fiction in some cases, some might say, but a lot of
Yeah.
times like they'll try to stick to scientific roots or what they can prove and what can be repeated with scientific theory, right? But we don't have the answer for everything, and that's I think there's still unexplainables, and filling in the
Mhm.
gaps with this concept of faith, is just completely absent to them. You can look back into the how the universe started, but the whole Big Bang theory, it's like something has to come from that, right? Something has to start everything like that. So there's a lot of theories like that people get into, but you can't. There's no way we can't know everything. So it's if there's skepticism there, like why is this completely off the table?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because one of the reasons why I was drawn to Ray Comfort's ministry was he was always recording himself talking to atheists. And to me, I was afraid of atheists before. I was afraid of them because I kept thinking science is going to get me, or their philosophies are going to get me, and I'm not that smart and all that stuff. And I watched this very humble, simple man um, really just communicate with their conscience. Like he would always start off. in the natural realm, talking about things that they can relate to. And he always made that transition with every conversation. And it's a system, it's a perfect system. And I really recommend you and Julie just sit down and watch
Sure.
one of yeah, yeah, really, and you can do a short one. But it's so interesting how a person can start off very confident, very arrogant about, they don't believe in the Bible, all this stuff. But it's almost like 99% of the time, everyone it becomes very convicted as soon as God's law is presented. As soon as God's law is presented, everyone is exactly the same. It doesn't matter if they're a physicist, it doesn't matter if they're a doctor or lawyer. Everyone becomes the same type of person as soon as you present God's law because they have a conscience that knows what he's saying is right. When he
Yeah.
says, well, hey, have you ever lied? Have you ever cheated? Have you ever had sex outside of marriage? It's like you can tell they're like, oh, you can see their eyes, you can see it on their face. They're completely stripped of any self righteousness they have. They're completely stripped, you know. But it's fascinating because I started getting into learning about atheism and the evolutionary theories and stuff like that. And I have, I'm just run through them real quick. But uh, I remember Kent Hovind, and this is another guy I think you're familiar with. You went through a lot of his material early in your, some of his lectures. Kent
Oh
Hovind,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I learned from him, and he's somebody who loves science, and he still does YouTube stuff, and I recommend people check him out. But he shared that the evolutionary concept has six definitions, not one. It has six, and I didn't know that, And he says most of the time when he's communicating with an atheist, and they say, "Well, let's talk about evolution," he says, "Okay, which one do you want to talk about?" Most of the time, right, even there, like they're already completely lost because they don't even know that there are different versions of evolution. So the first one is cosmic evolution.
Uh-huh.
That's the beginning of time, space, and matter, and things like that. That's essentially the Big Bang. The next is chemical evolution. That's all the elements and hydrogen. That's things coming together. There's stellar evolution. That's the planets, the stars coming together. Okay, so there's different definitions. All right, so we're the third one. Organic evolution. That's life. Being created and stuff like that. There's macroevolution. That's like the animals and human beings being established. And then there's of course, and macroevolution is also like animals turning into other animals. And then you have the final one, which is microevolution, and that's the only one that actually has some type of uh, legitimacy because that is, human beings kind of changing a little bit over time because of their environments or animals. You may have certain animals that you drop them off in a cold climate, and over time they start building up a resilience over time. Their family and their lines start becoming more hairy, so they can survive that environment, that climate. Um, or it might be human beings. You have human beings with maybe Adam and Eve was maybe fair skinned, maybe they were kind of in the middle, and you have different human beings because of the Tower of Babel migrated to Africa, and you have some that will have develop more complexions like myself, while others from more colder climates and they start developing blonde hair and different things. So that's the only one that has some type of legitimacy. But the first five are all purely religious. Not one
Yeah.
of them demonstrates evidence. Not one of them. Not one has evidence for, what it is that they claim. You know, that you actually have to take all five of them by faith. You have to just accept that there was a big bang, there was a something that an explosion, cosmic explosion that happened and created our four seasons and all these different animals and this organized life that we live here on Earth. That we have oxygen and we have all these things that work well together for us. A system of the universe with the sun and the distance. It's not too far to make us like freezing cold, but it's not too close to kill us. And everything is like supposedly by accident, everything took place. So it's really kind of like one of the things that I enjoy about Ray is when he meets an atheist and they say, "Oh, well, I'm an atheist," and he will say, "Oh, okay, so you believe that nothing created everything," which is a scientific impossibility.
Uh-huh.
And usually, like when he hits them with that, they have to kind of think it over, like, "Oh, I actually do think that. I do
Yeah.
think that nothing created everything," which is irrational. I mean, there's not one example of chaos and explosion creating order. There's no examples of that. So it's kind of silly. It's kind of foolish. It's And I'm not trying to, put down anybody who believes that, but yeah, it's like that's something that a person would retreat to if they don't want God. It's like I'll just buy into this because now I can do whatever I want. I don't. There's no authority over me. So yeah, it's very easy to. It's fun to sin and enjoy sin for a season. But yeah, but yeah, but
Yeah.
I
There,
say all that just to say that yeah, I'm not bothered by speaking to atheists or anybody else of other faiths because there's nothing for them to stand on. There's
yeah.
nothing literally to stand on.
There,
Not when you ask questions.
Now when you're purposeful and you're knowledgeable about what you're asking and you can back it up, there's a whole lot of resources I'm still trying to get into because I look at all that stuff, but I try to find counter arguments from atheists or anything, right, directed at that. There's a
Cool.
whole bunch of stuff, resources on YouTube or anything. Just I encourage you guys, like, do your research, like, look and stuff, follow your heart really, because what happened with me is, like, to get a good baseline, it was just stop trying to control everything, right, and just like let humble yourself and just follow the path that God lights up for you. And it's very evident in kind of what I can see throughout my life is like you just have different signs and everything more than coincidence, right? It could be coincidence, but it's a lot of coincidences to happen, right? Just little symbols and people like interacting with you and like a couple of different times. And I was talking to a family relative about it, and it's just very humbling because you could see some things as coincidence, but like three people coming to talk about you the same thing in the same week, all it's kind of like it's all kind of directing you in a certain path, right? And it feels right in your heart too. You just follow that path, and if it feels right, you are likely doing the right things. So I used to try and control everything and make it the way I wanted it, but just let go of that and follow just where your heart leads you, and that'll kind of take you to the right place. And always, but don't never give up your critical thinking. Always kind of be questioning things and make sure because if you believe something but you can't back it up, right? If you don't know an answer to a question, like then you're not. How can you can be persuaded? So for sure, really kind of find a foundation of your belief and make sure that it's strong. It can withstand attacks and it can just be sturdy. So that was a good kind of section for our religion, I think.